The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Access Television, the City of Oshkosh, the Oshkosh Cable Television Advisory Commission, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to another edition of Eye on Oshkosh. I'm Cheryl Hentz along with my co-host Tony Palmeri. A lot of folks have been saying, hey, whatever happened to Another Viewpoint? Well, we aim to please, and so here it is. This is Another Viewpoint with Tony and I tonight. We're going to be talking about a lot of different things. By now, everybody's gotten their property tax bills,
yes.
And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about what the city has done with respect to the budget, the new garbage fees that we're all going to be paying starting next year, and a lot of other things. So you brought your tax bill.
Yes.
I've already sent mine off to my mortgage company, so I don't have it.
By now, everyone should have one of these. Maybe we can get a. Should we try to get a little?
Sure, if you can zoom
Oh, there
in.
we go. Yeah, this is the Tony Palmeri tax bill.
And I think Mary Helen's going to try and push in on that a little bit.
We'll do that.
But
and after all the hoopla about how much we'd be paying, my taxes overall have gone up. Well, from 1,924 in 2004 to 2,070 in 2005. So about $150.
Yep. And like I said, I don't have mine with me. I sent it off to the mortgage company, but it, if memory serves me correctly, mine went up something like $400 and some, about a 26% increase. And granted, not all of it was the city, but the better majority of it was from the city.
For me, the crucial issue on taxes, whether we're talking about local, state, federal, is are we getting, for lack of a better phrase, a bang for our buck?
Mm-hmm. Our money's worth, yeah.
Do you think we are?
I don't know. You know, in some respects, I feel we are, but yet more and more seems to be taken away. And with that, the garbage fees that we're going to start paying. I mean, for anyone who's been living in a garbage can or under a garbage can, for lack of a better expression, you know, starting in, I believe it's the fourth quarter of 2006, probably around October or so of 2006, the city will start charging a monthly fee, $10 a month per property, to pick up garbage. Now, the caveat to that is that it's supposedly, I mean, we're already paying for trash pickup now in our property taxes.
Yes.
Okay, we all, I think, are in agreement about that. But supposedly it's going to come off the property tax bill, but it's not.
No, of course
not.
not.
I mean, are they going to show, and this is what I suggested on the website, is that what it should show then is a line item decrease for that amount that they're now going to be billing us for. And that won't happen.
No, of course not.
So basically, we're going to end up paying more.
No, and that's why I've, over the years, been opposed to even the concept of fee. Because when you look closely, you find out that most of these fees really are taxes.
Sure. And as we were talking about, you know, before the show, this really is a regressive type tax.
Of course.
Because the people who, I mean, the way it works is your property taxes are based on the amount of home that you have, the value of your home, as it is in any community. Oshkosh is not unique there, but the percentage of what goes for garbage pickup, it's based on your overall tax bill. So those people who have, and I don't have the multipliers and the numbers, but there's an equation that's used. And so the way it's going to come down is the people who have the more expensive homes, say $200,000 or more, or maybe it's even $150,000 or more, the people with the more expensive homes are going to actually be paying less under this fee-based garbage pickup system.
Of course.
And so those who have nicer homes usually have more money. That's how they can afford those homes. They make more money, so those who have more income are going to be paying less.
Right.
Those of us who don't have as much income will be paying more.
And that is a classic regressive tax. And also there are obviously differences in the amount of garbage people throw out.
Sure, sure.
So everyone's paying the same $10 a month regardless of how much garbage they
Yeah.
throw out. So hopefully the city at some point can move toward, in some cities they call it a variable rate system, where you pay based on how much garbage you actually thrown out. And I hope that City Hall is researching this on how to do that, because from what I've read, what happens is when a city moves toward that kind of system, when you know that you're going to pay less for throwing out less garbage, more people start doing things like backyard composting, which is really great for the environment, and it produces less garbage, less for the landfills and so on and so forth. But are they going to move? I mean, are they actually going to look to, or are they going to say, okay, we managed to get the $10 a month in?
They'll just keep upping the fee every year.
Well, see, that's the thing. I want to see the city council hold the city administration accountable for this. It's not enough that in council member statements they give speeches about how it would be nice to move towards something like that. They have to direct the administration. I would say set a target date. By a certain date, we have to have this new system in place. So I hope that is happening.
I don't know. I guess, we'll see in a couple of years if they're moving toward that. But there's, I have not talked to probably more than 3 or 4 people who think that this fee-based system is a good thing.
Yeah.
And one of the people I talked with was Councilman Paul Esslinger. Now, I've not talked to the other people on the council who supported this, so I'm not even counting them in that mix. But there's a few out there who just really don't care one way or the other. But the better majority of the people that I've talked to in the community are up in arms over this, because they know exactly what we've just been saying. Nothing is going to come down. We're not going to be paying any less. All it is it's another $120 every year that every household is going to have to come up with.
And see, what I found interesting was when the city manager first proposed this to the council, he didn't just argue that it was a financial emergency, that we need to find a way to raise money. He also made the argument, and I think Paul buys into this also, that there are some businesses that have been paying for garbage pickup but not getting the city fee. And so that it sounded like from that argument, they would say that even if it wasn't a financial crunch, we should move toward this out of fairness. And how do you feel toward that? I mean, this idea that you shouldn't be paying for something that you don't get, well, should that extend to, say, paying taxes for a public library? There's tons and tons of people who are paying for a public library. They don't use it.
Right.
There are tons.
For the leach.
Well, the same thing for the public school system. There's tons of people who have no children in the public school system.
I'm one of them.
But they're paying, I'm another one.
Yep.
I think it's good to pay into that system, even though I don't use it. So is it only businesses paying for garbage pickup that don't get the garbage pickup that should be privileged not to pay for it? Isn't it good to have a clean city?
Yeah. Well, I would like to think so. But, I mean, I guess one of my arguments with respect to the businesses paying for something that they're not getting is, as far as I know, the businesses are not only able to write off that garbage fee from their income tax filing every year, but, they're able to... Well, I mean, they're able to take those deductions.
Sure.
And here's a case where we're not going to be able to take that deduction now because it's a fee.
Correct.
And it's supposedly not going to be on our property tax bill, so therefore we won't, as property owners, be able to get that deduction.
And what businesses are we talking about?
I think,
is it like the big retail businesses in town?
Well, I think almost any business.
Okay.
I mean,
because a lot of the businesses are actually producing the things that become garbage. So there's a school of thought that says maybe you should contribute to the system to pick up the things that you're producing.
I mean, I don't know for sure what businesses we're talking about, but the other thing is that a business, if they're having to pay for something and those prices go up, or say they're not getting a service necessarily that they're paying for, they can adjust their prices. You and I can't adjust our household income.
Nope,
I
not
mean,
at all.
short of going out and getting another job or what have you. We don't have that luxury that they can just, change pricing on their merchandise and make up for some of that cost. So they're still, under this new system, they're still going to be able to deduct it from their income taxes.
Correct.
So as far as I'm concerned, the business owner, and I've got nothing against business owners, but they're going to come out on the good end of the stick here, and we're going to come out on the short end.
Now, isn't it true, Cheryl, that the fee, the garbage fee, could have been avoided if the council, they had to find $600,000, is that right?
I think it was like 630,000 or something like that.
So we're supposed to believe that they could not find $600,000.
Well, there was a way in which they could have found a huge chunk of that, and that was by, from what I understand, moving the purchase of some garbage trucks out of capital improvements into the general operating fund.
And the majority of them did not want to do that.
Right. And I don't know exactly why. I guess because, from what I understood, you have to replace garbage trucks more often than every 7 years or something like that. I mean, I don't know. I don't understand the particulars on that. So,
well, you know, Bert, I watched the budget meeting, and I think Bert Tower especially kept making a good point. But see, he was making this point last year also, that the problem seems to be in the very way we do budgeting in the city, that it seems to get started too late. And he didn't seem to have a real good, by his own admission, enough of a grasp of some of the assumptions behind the budget. And how is this going to be fixed?
well,
I mean, I think he's right, but I mean, how?
well, that is true. But you know, now this is Burke's second budget. Okay, so if he recognized that problem last year already, why wasn't he at least asking questions of people earlier in the year, even though the budget process itself didn't start until, you know, September or October or whenever it started? I mean, that's not really a very good excuse, I don't think. Now, granted, they were all sort of caught off guard by the levy freeze.
I was a little bit,
but still.
as I watched that meeting, it seemed like Mr. Castle and Frank Tower came in there, it seemed, already with their minds made up that they were going to vote for the budget that was proposed by the administration. And then the others just could not agree on what kind of additional cuts could have been made. I was actually very disappointed with the whole process.
Well,
they seem to be more collegial, but what is that worth?
Well,
I mean, there's a school of thought that says, you know, light comes from heat. Maybe you need more battle. You know, maybe you need more battle at those meetings. I think we do get better budgets when there's a little bit more of a clash.
Right, and how about this? I mean, now, I understand one's the operating budget and one is capital improvements budget, but look at $270,000 for floating docks down at the amphitheater, and another $70,000 for, you know, improvements to the skate park.
See, where did the floating dock come from? That just seems to...
I don't know. It was interesting how Dick Wallink, our city manager, just sort of pushed that in very, very smoothly, and it just went through just like that. Nobody asked any questions about it. I mean, Paul Esslinger tried to get it taken out.
Well, I mean, someone I can't remember who it was. It may have been Brian or Paul. I can't remember. Someone asked a very good question. If the money we're getting from the, we're getting some money, I think, from the state for that. If we don't do it this year, can we still get that money? And the answer was not no. The answer was, well, you know, maybe, probably we can get it again. So it seemed like the main reason to do it now, you know, you might lose that money, didn't seem to be really viable.
No.
So they could have delayed it.
And so what? Even if you do lose the money, so what?
So what?
I mean, again, it comes down to providing essential services as opposed to having a place for people to tie up their boats while they watch a show at the amphitheater. I mean, this is not comparing apples to apples. It comes down to needs versus wants, and what our city taxes should be providing, and what the city is saying we're not going to provide. So, I don't know. I'm very disappointed in it. I think that they need to start the budget process earlier, I agree, and I think they need to start getting in touch a little bit more with their constituents.
Yeah, and I think I think again, Paul and Brian have talked about doing some kind of outside study of the budget to find out exactly how much, say, staff that we need in certain places. I think a study like that probably has to be done by someone not connected with City Hall, and so hopefully they'll get moving on that.
Well, you know, these are all very good ideas, but again, will they actually come to fruition? And I think that with people like Paul and people like Brian, who are rather tenacious about these things, with them staying on top of this, maybe something will get done, but it's going to require the support of some of your other council members too. And if some of these other folks just kind of quash this, it's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
And that's what I fear. And that's one of the reasons that I think we continue to stay in the same boat that we're in year after year.
Yeah, one reason why I'm disappointed, and this, I mean no offense to anyone who's sitting on the council, but if you think about it, this is one of the most expensive councils that we've ever had. I mean in the sense of how much money they spent to get elected. So this is a very expensive council. It came in heralded as it's going to be the most progressive council we've had, whatever that means.
Yeah.
And yet, not again, I don't mean this to be disrespectful or to bash. I'm not saying that they never do good things, but what have we gotten so far? We're getting the Five Rivers Resort with a financing mechanism that is hardly what I would call, confidence building.
Right.
There's a lot of questions involved
Still
in
unanswered.
that. That's still unanswered, but we're getting that. We're getting this pier in Menominee Park that got passed in the space of 2 days.
Yeah, we want to
I
talk
guess.
about that too. That's
We'll
on
get
my
to that
list.
later on.
Yep.
We're getting a budget that's giving us garbage fees. So this is the great progressive council.
Yeah, and we're getting floating docks and improved skate park. So
All right,
there
so
you go.
what I want to know from all that campaign rhetoric about we're going to ask the tough questions, we're going to be the progressive city, I just want to know what really have we gotten from this? I don't see that anything has really changed.
No, and again, it comes down to, some of these council members are getting stonewalled. It's just like Paul always being on the losing end of votes. Again, Meredith Shireman and Brian Bain trying to do good things, trying to bring up certain things, but if you don't have that majority of the council, it gets you absolutely nowhere. I mean, you can talk until you're blue in the face, but you're not going to get anywhere with it. And that's why who we're putting in these council positions is so damned important.
Yeah, very, very much so. And of course, maybe we'll get to this later, but let's not forget that one of the reasons why our council is in crisis has to do with what's going on in Madison.
Yes.
And I think our state legislature right now, if there ever was a time when an entire legislature should be recalled, this is probably a time. I mean, their priorities are completely out of whack. Every day we pick up the paper in Madison, they're talking about guns.
Yep.
They're talking about death penalty. They're talking about gay marriage. Meanwhile, we've got a massive number of people out of work.
Yes.
We have a massive number of people who can't afford any health care. The education system is going to hell from K through 12 and the university. And yet, these folks down there, 99 members of the Assembly and 33 members of the Senate, are acting as if we're in a great financial straits. And I think if you're going to talk about death penalty, you have to have the luxury to be able to talk about it.
Yeah. Well, here's what they're talking about now. Now they're debating whether or not we should call the tree down at the Capitol, if we should call it a Christmas tree, or we should call it a holiday tree. Yeah. Who the hell cares?
Well, apparently a lot of people do.
But these folks, 46 lawmakers, most of them Republicans, sent Governor Doyle a letter yesterday. We're taping this on the 8th of December, so that they would have sent this letter off on the 7th of December. Sent him a letter urging him to rename it
the Christmas tree.
The Christmas tree, saying the tree is one of the great symbols of Christmas and should be named as such. Well, that's fine, but I mean, does it require their time to do this? I mean, really, when we have so many other things that are pressing in this state and on this state's people, and this is the kind of nonsense that they're wasting their time and our tax dollars on. And yet we have two state lawmakers, State Senator Carol Ressler and our local representative from the Assembly, Greg Underheim, who drag their pompous rear ends up to city council chambers in the other end of this building and basically make a mockery out of what these people on our council are doing by saying, well, you asked for the job, don't expect us to tell you where to make cuts. Yeah, they asked for the job, but they didn't ask for the job Maybe they wouldn't have asked for the job had they known that you guys in Madison were going to throw a levy freeze on us. I mean, I saw nothing useful in their presentation to the city council when they were there, what was it, about 4 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, something
Yeah,
like
and
that?
just to acknowledge my bias, I mean, I've run against Greg twice,
Well,
so that's
sure,
my
but-
bias here. But and you know, I have been calling for years to have those elected officials come before the city council, and yet after it happened, now I'm having second thoughts.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's going to be a smoke and mirror session, it seems like we're just wasting the time
Yeah.
of the council and of the people.
They presented themselves in such an arrogant, pompous way. I don't think
It's part of what's happened in Madison,
Yeah.
Cheryl. What has happened is Wisconsin used to have a legislature in Madison that was filled primarily with people you would call mavericks. That is, whether they were Republican or Democrat or something else, they ultimately represented their constituency. And that meant that every now and then they were willing to tick off their party. You'd have to represent your constituents.
Right.
What has happened in the last 10 to 15 years, the elected officials in Madison really no longer pay attention to their constituency. They pay attention to their party leadership. And that is essentially the problem that we have. And until that is reversed by some kind of reform of, say, our campaign finance system or whatnot, we're going to be going through this for years and years
Sure.
and years. And until the average person wakes up and says, it's not at this point, it's not even a question of electing different people, because now we've got people running for office who accept that corrupt system. So you have to have, if you're going to elect people, you better elect people who want to reform that system. Otherwise, we're going to be in the same boat, whether they're called Democrat or Republican. So there's got to be some change down there in Madison. And quite frankly, not to bash Governor Doyle, but he's been very disappointing in this. He came into office in 2002 saying that the first thing he was going to do was reform the corrupt politics in Madison. Jay Heck is with Common Cause in Wisconsin, a big reform advocate down there. He's told me personally several times, Jim Doyle, the governor, and John Gard, the Speaker of the Assembly, have been the two biggest obstacles to reforming that system in Madison, because they're both playing into that big money, big special interest system.
Sure.
How do we get out of this?
I don't know, but you know, I'm so sick of party politics,
Yeah.
party politics, party politics. It's disgusting, and it'll never happen. But I would just love to see the parties just done away with, and you know, just try and work for the common good of the common person, for the better majority of the people that you're elected to serve.
Yeah.
And if you do that, you can't go wrong. Are you going to please everybody 100% of the time? No. But you're going to be doing what's right for the better majority
Yeah.
of your constituents.
Well, I got active in third-party politics because I think you'll find with third parties, whether we're talking about the Greens, Libertarians, or others, that within those parties, and obviously we want to win elections, that's why we run candidates, but within those parties there's more of an ethic that you should stand for something.
Right,
You should stand for something in addition to getting elected.
right.
The major parties have reached the point where it's all about getting elected, tell people what they want to hear, and where does that get us in the long run?
Right.
Nothing really improves for the better, and we reached a situation like in the city of Oshkosh where we're just not getting our proper share of state funds, and we're not getting the kind of representation that would make our city councilor's job a little easier.
Right.
You know, I mean, people tend to forget our counselors work part-time. That's not a full-time job.
That's right.
So with
And
a part-time job, you need as much help as possible from the full-time politicians down in Madison. Those folks in Madison are making a darn good salary.
but aren't they people like Greg Underheim? Isn't that supposed to be a part-time position?
In the statutes, yeah.
Yeah.
But it has devolved into a full-time position.
Exactly.
Actually, again, Jay Heck from Common Cause told me that we have one of the best paid legislatures in the country, and yet we're not a very big state.
No.
I think we're 18th in population, but we have the 9th best paid legislature. Something is
We could start saving some money there, perhaps.
well, you know, a lot of these guys, I mean, this is just so ridiculous. A lot of these people, you know, they get a $60 a day per diem just when they're in Madison. Some of them come into Madison literally just to check their email.
Yeah.
Can you imagine someone getting $60 to go and check their email?
To me, it wouldn't be worth it, you know? I mean, you drive from Oshkosh, for example, hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half, just to check your email.
Well,
and come on, nowadays, you can check email from almost anywhere. So they don't even have to do that. So to be paying per diem for that is an outrage in and of itself.
Well, the per diem needs to be looked at, and and remember, they were talking in Madison about reducing the size of the county board, which, all right, maybe that's a good idea, and so I don't think it is, but maybe it is. What about reducing the size of the state legislature?
Well, you'll never hear Greg Underheim talking about that, but he actually brought forth an amendment to change this size of the county board here.
So anyway, hopefully within the next couple of months, if not, hopefully, I hope it's not years, there will be more of a value placed in Madison on paying attention to the real problems of the people.
That would be nice, but I don't know. I'm kind of a pessimist about that. I don't think it's going to happen. I think that things are only going to get worse as time goes on. And I don't like saying that because I try and be somewhat positive about, the greater good, but I don't see it happening.
Well, I guess we have to keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah. That's true. You had brought up about the fishing pier.
Yeah.
The last that we knew, of course, the DNR had approved the pier.
Right.
And now there's a group that has filed a petition, or they're getting signatures on a petition, and they intend to file that, if they haven't already, with the DNR. And then I guess the DNR will send it to a special legal counsel within the DNR or something to kind of look at this. I still, this whole process of the way this thing happened is just so disconcerting to me. And we have a parks director, and, Tom Stefani, as an individual, is a likable guy.
Oh, yeah.
I've talked with him a few times about different issues, and, he's a likable guy. But I don't know what it is when it comes to this parks director and these parks, but I think the Northwestern hit it on the head when they said that he seems to have this idea that the parks are his to do with what he pleases and his alone. And these people, somebody wrote in to the Northwestern in a letter to the editor saying, he should be applauded for the good things he's done. He's doing his job. Hello, it's not like he's this benevolent guy running around doing good things for the parks. He's doing it because he's paid, and paid handsomely to do this.
Well, I don't necessarily have any opposition to any of the projects, but on something like
the zoo project, though, you've got a problem with that.
The elk exhibit.
Yeah.
Well, but again, my problem with the elk exhibit, like the pier, is that it seems like there's not enough public discussion of them.
Yeah.
I mean, my philosophy of government and public policy is that it should be need-based. That is there a need for these things? And you discover that through public discussion.
Well, and the wolf exhibit was another example.
Yeah. Now, we may have come to the conclusion that there was neither a need or a want for an elk exhibit, in which case you don't do it. Maybe there is a great want or need for that fishing pier. I don't think that there is, but maybe there is. We don't know. I mean, it got very little public discussion, and it seems to me when things just get rushed through with no discussion, what you end up doing, and this is very dangerous in the city, you end up creating long-term bitterness, and that's not good for any city to have that kind of thing. And I don't know. Do you hear lots of people talking about the need for a fishing pier in Menominee Park?
No. You can go to the fishing piers that we have right now and find plenty of places to fish on most days.
I mean, again, nothing against the Otter Street Fishing Club. I think it's wonderful that they want to donate something to the city.
Agree.
That's just beautiful. But I've been spending a lot of time in the warm weather months biking out in that area of the park, and the point, Ames Point, I think it's called. That's a natural fishing pier. And you see some people fishing off there, but not a tremendous amount. I mean, what I wanted to have demonstrated was, again, the need for a pier when you've got a natural pier that doesn't seem to be being used.
Right.
So I just get the feeling that those questions were not asked, that the input wasn't really wanted, and essentially it became a situation where one group wanted it and they rushed it through.
Sure, and that's exactly the point. Is how many questions can be asked and how much input can be garnered when you put something in front of a Parks Advisory Board one day and about 25, 26 hours later it's in front of the City Council and they're giving it the old stamp of approval just like that. I mean, you can't garner much support or discussion or question asking.
Yeah, and then apparently the neighbors and the Otter Street Club did have a meeting, and I don't think it really accomplished much.
Are you talking about the one that was held over at the Otter Street Fishing
Were you at that
Club's?
meeting?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, what happened there?
Well, I mean, basically just a bunch of arguing. I mean, there was one woman who just, you know, kept trying to get louder and louder every time somebody had opposition to the pier. I felt that she was just outright rude. And then you had Terry Wooler from the Otter Street Fishing Club, who I don't think is ever very respectful to people who take a differing position from him. And again, the Otter Street Fishing Club does wonderful things for this community.
Sure.
But, you know, I think even the Northwestern has begun to see that the way you get consensus from people is you take time to build consensus. And you don't get approval and public buy-in by rushing things through, because the first thing that happens is, A, people feel that they have been cut out of the process and that you don't care what they think when we're paying for these parks, and they are our parks. And B, they just feel like they've lost all value when it comes to the people who are making decisions for their city. And I don't think that's the way that you create goodwill amongst any citizens.
Yeah. The other thing to consider about the pier, and I assume that Otter Street and Mr. Stefani know what they're doing, but my understanding is that there's now all kinds of federal guidelines for building children's piers about the kind of railing that they must have. There's Americans with Disabilities Act guidelines.
There's some ADA requirements.
I mean, I don't. Has anyone thought about any of this? I don't know. Are they going to pay for those additions? I mean, I don't know.
Well, and if those things change the design of the pier, then I wouldn't think that that would be allowable. I would think that that would have to go back before the DNR again, because it's changing the design. And one of the things, and I could be wrong about this, but I thought that the thing that the person from the DNR, this Cheryl Latch, I thought that she said that if you change the design of the structure, then you have to basically reapply for the permit. And I'm pretty sure that that's what she said. So if they're going to be changing these things, then why would they not have to go back before the DNR again?
Good point.
I don't know. But I guess, you know, there's no timeline, I guess, for, you know, when this is going to be ruled on or anything like that.
Didn't you find it shocking that, you know, again, the pier may be the greatest thing since white bread, for all we know. I don't know. But didn't you find it shocking that we had 5 members of that council that voted for that without really having any design?
Yeah.
They didn't know what they were voting for. All they knew is that it was a contribution, that it was going to be a pier, but the actual specifications were very, very vague at that point. If you were an elected official, would you vote for something with that little information in place? I mean, I think Meredith was the only one who voted against it.
Yeah, and I don't know how Paul, I think Paul said he would have voted against it had he been there, but he was not there that night. Do I find it shocking? No, not really. I find it appalling, but I don't know that I find it shocking. I mean, anytime anybody wants to give this city anything, our city council just might as well be jumping up and down in the council day saying, oh, goody, goody, something else that we don't have to pay for.
Okay, I know people often get frustrated that government moves slowly, but most times government should move slowly, because on most issues, it's not necessarily with the pier, but on most issues we're talking about taxpayer dollars. So you better be slow and you better be deliberate. My understanding, my recollection at night was Meredith was simply asking for 2 additional weeks.
That's right.
Just give us
basically 1 meeting.
Right. Just give us 2 weeks to talk to people around Menominee Park. Now, okay.
And look at other alternative places.
Correct. If there is a crisis in a city where you can't have 2 weeks, fine. You have to vote right at that moment. But most issues are not at that crisis level.
Right.
So the fact that 5 people could vote for something that they knew had only been passed the night before says something. And those are the kinds of things that people should remember when politicians come up for re-election. But too often, those things just get forgotten, and then if a candidate brings those things up, they're often accused of making personal attacks. No,
Yeah,
it's
and
not
it's not a personal
no.
attack.
No.
This is about the way someone has voted. This is
Exactly.
about their voting record. This is about the job that they've done. It's basically a job review,
Yeah.
if you will. You know, and so there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I get a little tired of people saying, "Oh, you know, you're personally attacking this person." No, there's a difference between personal attacks, as I think you and I have both seen in our lifetime,
Yes.
and going after someone's voting record and the way they do business,
Sure.
or business as usual. But you know, this whole business of pushing this through like they did, do you think that it will stop them from doing something like that in the future, now that they see how much ruckus this really caused? Or do you think that it just won't make any difference in the future?
I think it depends how powerful the special interests are. It seems like there are some special interests in the city that are able to get things through quickly, and so you'd want to think it was a wake-up call, but I would tend to think not. I mean,
And why was it pushed through so quickly, Tony? Because after all, I mean, if it was a case of got to get this pushed through now because we've got to break ground and get this done before winter gets here, well, you know, between the public hearings that they had to have held on this after the neighbors said, whoa, wait a minute, and now between, you know, that and the petition process, this thing's not going to happen. The Parks Director says it's probably going to have to wait until spring. So what would have been so wrong with waiting a couple of weeks in the first place?
you know, even with the amphitheater management,
Well,
I mean,
that's another
I
example.
was someone who would have been willing to wait the entire first season before hiring a management, because look, PMI, can we talk about this now?
Sure.
Okay, PMI out of Green Bay was chosen. Do you remember the major reason they were chosen? They have
Oh,
experience.
no, not really anymore.
Well,
They had a lot
as
of
I recall,
experience with this kind of
there were
venue.
two. There were two. Well, no, not really. Not with an outdoor venue like that. They have experience
But
booking
with promotions and things like
national
that.
acts.
Right.
They have experience booking national acts, and more important, they are community-based, community-centered. So
That has not proven to be the case,
no.
though. Not here
Well, but
anymore.
what we have found out are two things. Number one, they've had to acknowledge that maybe it's a painful reality that you're not going to get a lot of top-line national acts into that amphitheater for a variety of different
But
reasons.
weren't people trying to say
And even
in the
they said
first
it.
place,
And even Mr. Wachter from PMI admitted that before they got the vote for them. And secondly, we've now found out that if you are a community group and want to use that amphitheater, it's going to be a hefty charge.
if you need sound and lights and all of that stuff.
A lot. So we're
Exactly.
in this bizarre position where is it the Oshkosh Community Band? I believe that's what they're called.
Yes, I believe so.
A kind of organization that you think that gift was designed for.
Yeah.
They can't afford to use it. You'd have to have a fundraiser that'll pretty much drain your organization's funds. So, you know, again, the council needed to do a more rigorous investigation of what was appropriate for that venue. And of course, you know, not to beat a dead horse, but I was someone who believed that the city should have managed that. I mean, Mr. Stefani at first sounded like he wanted to take over that. And I think
Absolutely.
rather than building elk exhibits, rather than worrying about piers, give them that.
Yeah.
Manage the amphitheater. Then the city gets, you know, now we're worried about getting 10% of the income or $30,000. What would have been
Well,
wrong with getting all the income?
It's absolutely ridiculous. And, you know, again, like you said, not to beat a dead horse, but I will go back to what a bunch of us were saying last year already, including those of us who were running for the city council. Why does everything always have to be rushed through? Because they don't have their questions answered I mean, you know, they'll sit there, half the time they don't even ask questions, but when they do, they don't get answers to them, but they vote in favor of these things anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just, it's ridiculous the way these things are
I mean,
always rushing through.
Things are bad when an average citizen has to take it on. I write a column for the Valley Scene, as you know, called Media Rants, and the December issue, every December issue, I write what's called my own Tony Awards.
And thank you
for
mine,
yes,
by the way.
yes, and I think yours was for being one of the cobblestoners who stood up to the bullies. But I gave my own Citizen of the Year award to this fella Jeff Matsey, who I've
Yes.
never met, but he was a guy who did what the Common Council should have done, was to force the council to confront the legality of the waiving of the bids for those leach bathrooms. That man went and contacted the Attorney General's office. He contacted the local DA, and he was able to find that, in fact, the law was broken. The city administration will disagree with that until they're blue in the
Oh,
face,
sure.
but it's pretty clear that something improperly was done there. Now, my question is, why should Jeff Matsey have to be the one doing that?
Well, and along with that, our own district attorney, Bill Lennon, has said that he's not going to pursue that, even though clearly the law was broken.
know.
Because, you know, if we want to pursue it, we can either start legal action on our own, or we can pursue it at the ballot box by voting these people out of
Or
office.
did he use the argument also that well, even if you take him to court over this, you probably can't convict? I mean, this was the same thing years ago when the infamous Joe Paulus was DA. I asked him to investigate whether the city had violated the open meetings law as regards the 100 block. Remember, we get up one morning and we find out that Mr. Ganther is going to have that, right? What happened in this meeting?
Right.
And then the council members, they have different recollections of what happened in the meeting and so
Yeah,
on.
because no formal minutes are really
Yeah,
taken.
so Paulus ended up writing me a letter back where he concludes that, you know, you're right. They probably did break the open meetings law, but I'd never be able to get a jury to convict on something like that.
Then why do we have these laws?
Exactly.
You know, I mean, the same kind of nonsense was given to me by the DA up in Brown County over this can board contribution to Breathe Free Oshkosh's campaign to ban smoking in restaurants. You know, money that was given to them illegally through meetings that were held improperly, without quorums and what have you. You know, okay, so they slapped him on the wrist, sent him a letter. You know, damn it, start enforcing some of these laws. I mean, you know, don't just, that's like saying, okay, you shoplifted, but we're going to go ahead and prosecute you because you need to be taught a lesson. Well, why not prosecute some of these other people then? Why just give them the courtesy of a letter? I mean, there's an imbalance here. There's a definite inequity in the justice system.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not anything new. That's an age-old complaint. But it just, if you don't start enforcing things like this, then you're going to continue having elected officials doing this stuff over and over and over again because they just basically thumb their nose at the law and they say, well, the worst that can happen is we're going to get a letter from the DA. Big deal. We'll take our chances.
Oh yeah, elected officials will do what they can. So someone's got to enforce accountability. Again, I really applaud that Mr. Jeff Matsey for doing what he did in 2005, but I expect our elected officials to do that.
Well, clearly they didn't, and I don't think that we can ever expect that they will unless you have a major change in the complexion of our city council. But, you know, that may not still be finished.
I mean, a lot of them, I'm sure, just don't want to rock the boat. I mean, you know, whenever you try and look into things like that, you've rocked the. See, what has always puzzled me.
Isn't it good to rock the boat sometimes?
Yeah,
I mean,
and
not all the time.
See, what I've never understood, overly cautious, part-time local elected officials, because if their fear is if I rock a boat and I end up being wrong, I may get voted out of office. But I mean, if you're a part-time official, isn't that where you should be the gutsiest?
Mm-hmm.
In other words, what are you afraid? If you're sitting on the Oshkosh Common Council and you operate according to your conscience and you operate according to conviction, and you end up ticking off a lot of people and you end up getting voted out of office, so what?
Yeah.
I mean, what are you risking? It's not like these folks in Madison who you can tell are schmoozing, shucking and jiving to keep their $45,000 a year job with their $60 a day per diem, their great health care benefits, their great Wisconsin retirement system. All right, there, I think it's abominable that they are not acting according to conviction and conscience. But at least you can see with them, they're trying to protect what they perceive as a really good deal. What is a county supervisor, a common counselor, a school board member, what are they protecting?
Well, that's
Other than a special interest in the community. Is that what it's all about?
Well, and Melanie Bleckel would oftentimes say, you know, what can they possibly take away from me? I have nothing to lose.
Yeah.
And she was one of those that I think most people would consider a maverick. I mean, a lot of people couldn't stand her. They couldn't stand the way she voted on things, and they downright, flat out hated her guts.
Well,
but you know, she will readily admit that you either love her or you hate her, and she's probably very correct there. There's not a whole lot of middle ground there, but she was not afraid to stand up to people because she had nothing to lose.
And sadly, what does happen is we do end up electing people, and you know, you have to choose from the choices available. Too many people with courage and conviction don't run.
Yeah.
And we end up electing a lot of people who go in being basically very accommodating towards certain interests in the community.
Right.
And that's a problem. I mean, we do have to have, you know, there are a lot of very gutsy people who just have gotten very turned off to politics. And their energies go in other directions, which are very valuable also.
Sure.
But you know, wouldn't it be nice one year to go vote in April and you look at those names on the ballot, and everybody on that ballot is kind of like a battler and a fighter and someone that you know is going to level with you.
That would be like a pipe dream.
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it necessarily happening. I mean, it might. I mean, sadly, I don't want to see things in our country get any worse, but if we get into a situation where, you know, the war drags on, the healthcare situation for people gets worse, the economy gets worse, I mean, the worse things get, then it does tend to bring out some of those people.
Sure.
Because the need is greater. But I don't want to, it shouldn't have to happen that way.
No, but I think that's what causes even voter apathy. You know, that's why people just aren't, I think that's one of the reasons anyway, people aren't going to the polls the way they should. They just figure, you know, what difference does it make? Where was this? I just read this in the paper. It was some little community around here. They just had a recall election. And every person that they tried to get recalled was reelected.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, it almost makes you lose hope in humanity. It almost makes you lose hope in decent politicians. You know, I mean, I don't understand. I mean, you can get enough people to sign that there should be a recall election, and then you can't overturn these people.
I know.
Something there's a disconnect somewhere.
They're very much.
And the whole election process is disheartening in so many ways because people won't go to the polls, they think their votes don't count, they think the politicians are crooked and out to get them, and in many cases I think they are. And then you've got things like this, you try and recall people that you don't think are doing the right thing, and they still, you know, those dirty bums, they get back in there.
Well, down in Madison, sadly, they want to make it even more difficult to vote now. I mean, finally, the United States attorney down in the Milwaukee area, Steve Biskupik, has finally now concluded that there was no conspiracy or fraud in the 2004 elections. And, you know, the Republicans especially are big on this voter ID bill, which is a solution in search of a problem. It turns out that you cannot find any problem in the 2004 elections that would have been solved by having a voter ID in place. But what we know what the voter ID will do is make it more difficult for certain categories of voters.
You were saying students in particular,
because
they do move so much.
The way the law is written, your ID has to have your current address on it. Students move regularly. So we already have problems enough getting them to vote. That makes it even more difficult. There are ways to fix the voting problem.
Sure.
I mean, one way is we've got to treat the poll workers better. I mean, have you noticed that the poll workers are always generally, not always, but generally elderly people who are very overworked on those days if it's a high voter turnout? Well, the state gives very little support to poll workers. So that's where we have to fix the problem.
One of our crew members is a poll worker and works very long hours, and I don't know how she feels about whether or not she's treated well or not, but we'll talk to her.
I
about
also
that
think, you know,
sometime.
in many countries, Election Day is a holiday, and you know, people literally get off from work.
So they can go vote.
Yeah. And I would like to see something done here. Well, you know, in some countries like Brazil, for example, it is illegal not to vote.
Wow.
If you are between 18 and 65, you legally have to vote. If you're over 65, you have the option of voting. If you're 16 and 17, you have the option of voting. But 18 to 65, you have to vote. The penalty.
How do they enforce that?
With their, you know, voter lists. If your voter list is not checked off, you didn't vote, and the penalty is, I don't know, you don't go to prison.
Yeah.
It's a monetary fine, and of course it's a poor country, and so the monetary fine would be substantive. But you know, I don't know if I would support that. But I mean, think about it. The city could fine you if you don't shovel snow off your sidewalk. But there's no possible fine for not meeting your civic responsibility.
Right.
Right? So, and it's funny. It's
that's
funny.
an interesting
It's
concept.
really interesting because I always bring this up with my students, and usually 90% of them are outraged at the idea that you would force people to vote. And I discuss it with them, and of course it turns out that they don't want. No one likes to be forced to do anything.
Right.
But then I always frame it this way. Well, look at the things that you are forced to do. And I said, you know, obviously if people legally had to vote, we probably have a 90% turnout.
Sure.
Now, if we had a 95% turnout, do you think our local council, state legislature, federal government would look different than they look right now?
Oh, I think it looked real different.
Yes.
Real different.
And
we
thus-
could probably
and thus-
start clearing up some of these problems.
Yes. And thus you see why the establishment does not want to have a mandatory voting system.
Sure. I don't know that I would go so far, though, as to support, you know, having the day off. I mean, I think that our polls are open long enough that people can get to a poll. I mean, they're open from 7 in the morning till 8 at night. That's 13 hours. And if you work some weird shift work where you just absolutely can't make it, I mean, you can vote by absentee ballot. I think there's a lot of ways for people to make it to the poll
And,
on Election Day.
In some countries, if less than 50% of the people vote, the election is void, and you have to redo the election.
And that could be costly.
Now, it could be, but would that be an incentive for people to go out and vote? If you know,
I don't know. Would
if
it?
you know that the
I mean-
election is going to be void, well, those costs will keep piling up.
Yeah.
See, it seems like what we've done in this country is we basically have taken this issue off the map. We've rarely discussed voting reform. And so if we have, in April of 2006, if we have a primary election for, say, council, what do you think the voter turnout will be?
Probably not great. Probably not great. I don't know, though. You know, speaking of that, and we're in our last probably 8 minutes here, but, you know, we're taping this on the 8th of December. Papers have just now starting to be circulated. We've got different, I've got my sheet here. There are 3 seats up on the city council, and one is Paul Esslinger's. We actually have less time than I thought. We're down to about 4.5 minutes. One is Paul Esslinger's seat, and then we've got the 2 towers, Frank and Burke Tower. And Burke Tower plans to run for re-election. Paul is running again. Frank Tower apparently does not plan to run, and there are 2 other people whose names I have already heard of. Mike Domke, who is running for city council, and Dennis McHugh, who used to serve on the school board. And
That's going to be interesting.
That will be interesting, because he's one of those mavericks. I mean, he was not afraid to stand up to the majority of the school board, and he will not be afraid to stand up to the majority of this council.
Well, and McHugh is one of those people that there tends to be no gray area with him. People either love him or they love him or they hate him.
It's a Melanie Bleckel thing all over again.
Yeah, and it'd be interesting to see what kind of passions he inflames. What I find most interesting in what you just said is that Frank Tower's not running. Now, does that mean that he's being groomed for mayor?
That could possibly be the case. But you know what? I think it's a mistake to take a year. If that's the case, if that's the game plan, I think that's stupid to take a year off from city council.
And of course,
I mean,
everyone, even Stu Rickman on the show, keeps saying that Greg Underheim is not going to run.
Yeah.
Everyone is saying that except Greg.
Yeah.
So
well,
if
Greg's not saying he is,
no.
and he's not saying he
But
isn't.
if Greg doesn't
but there's
run,
time yet. That's not for another.
Would Frank Tower
11
run?
months.
Would Frank Tower run for that seat?
I don't know.
I guess
That's a
we'll
possibility. We're going to wait and see, I guess. All 38 seats on the county board are up for re-election. I guess there are a few people who are planning to run for a few of those seats. And on the school board, 3 of the 7 seats are up there: Dan Becker, Dennis Kavanaugh, and Amy Weinsheim. And from what I understand, all 3 are running for re-election there. Plus, there's some other names that are in the hopper there. And I apologize, I don't know offhand who's running for school board, but so that's where we're at so far with some of these things, and people have until the end of the month to get their papers signed, and have to have them turned back in by January 3rd.
Well, last
So-
year we had, and including you, I think, we had 14 primary candidates for the common council.
Was it 14 or was it more than that? For some reason, I thought it was more than that.
Yeah, I don't.
But it was a lot.
And I was never able to figure that out, why it was that large. But it doesn't look like it's going to be that large in 2006.
No.
I thought it was great.
It was. I mean, you know, what's interesting is with all the blog sites that keep popping up and
Yeah.
so forth, and the different groups that are having forums, that's good, but it really takes a toll on a person running for office because there's so many places to go,
Oh,
so
yeah.
many things to do, and, you know, I mean, people are trying to do
Well,
this
let me say to people out
while
there.
still working
let me say to
full-time and
peop-
having a family
Let me
life.
say to people out there who are thinking of running, if you're thinking of running, you should.
Yeah.
Because, okay, I've run for office twice. It's been grueling both times.
Mm-hmm.
State assembly is a grueling thing. But I don't think there is any better way to have an impact on the public policy agenda than running for office.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone likes to win, but even when you lose a race, you have had some impact on the public policy agenda, and that's a very, very worthwhile thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're out there on the fence, you're not sure whether to run, run. You're worthwhile. You haven't won yet, but I'm sure you're happy that you did run.
Well, I'm happy that I ran. You know, I learned things in the process, and you know, due to some personal reasons, I'm not going to run this time. But I'm not ruling anything out for the future either. So, you know, I guess we'll see. But right now, there are some other things that I need to take care of that are, frankly, a little bit more important. And I'm one of these people who I don't want to put too much out there if I can't give it my best and give it my all. And I just feel like if I tried to do that this time, even campaigning, I don't think I'd be able to give it my all.
Sure.
So, so that's that. And the little timer is being waved at us, so I guess it's time to kind of wrap things up. But just one comment I wanted to make real quickly. Karen Bowen from the school board had said in a fifth Wednesday forum recently that we only have one media outlet in Oshkosh, and that's not a very accurate statement. I mean, we've got the newspaper and we've got the radio. There are shows like this.
Lots of
there are plenty
websites.
of blog sites now.
Go to ionoshkosh.com or my website, tonypalmeri.com. There's a lot of good alternative
Absolutely.
sites out there now.
There's always ways for governmental agencies to get the word out to people.
Definitely.
So. All right, very good. Well, this is fun. We'll do it again, and next time it won't take so long. We'll see you next time. Until then, take good care and keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.
Bye.